Welcome to Regenerative Rising's Elevating Stories, Activating Change. I'm your host, Seleyn and DeYarus, Executive Director and Founder of Regenerative Rising. And with me today is a very special guest, Nisha Mary Poulose, who formerly served as our Executive Director and host of this podcast, and is the founder and technical lead of Woven Design Collaborative. She's based in Goa, India. She grew up in Kerala, India, and has always been guided by her love of nature. She has her degree in architecture from Shehnai, the University in Shehnai, India. She has two masters, a master's in international cooperation and urban development from the Technical University of Darmstadt, Germany, and a urban habitat and planning master's from the University of Pierre Mendes in Grenoble, France. Nisha, thank you for joining me today in what I hope will be an interesting conversation between us. We have had many interesting conversations over the years and have sort of giggled along the way. Wow, if we just recorded that, how interesting would that have been?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's interesting to be a guest. I just saw it's also because it's been a very powerful journey, and yeah, it's nice. It's nice. It's the first month of the new year, and I'm excited to see where both our paths are leading to, and how this conversation sort of reflects that.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate the willingness, and I have listened to many of your podcasts now, and they are beautiful, and you do a wonderful, wonderful job as a host. So I hope I will do justice to the seat I am sitting in today in our conversation. So I think what folks might find interesting is the evolution of where things are at this moment in your journey. And I also want us to touch on some of the context of how you and I came to know each other and the sort of unfolding of your relationship to Regenerative Rising. But I think of more important in the here and now is to speak about the here and now and to have an understanding of what is attaching your genius right this moment, or attracting your genius at this moment.
Thank you for that. It sounds so profound when you phrase it like that. Well, actually, I'm focusing a lot more on the sort of the place that I am currently at, and sort of focusing my attention on the aspects that are affecting this place both positively and negatively. So I use before I joined Regenerative Rising, I was working as a strategic planner with a whole systems perspective to solve these issues that we're faced with as a modern society, which really is honestly the way the kind of development that we're seeing is very harmful to nature in most ways. So as a planner, I've always been working towards how can we find a more balanced, harmonious pathway? How can we work with nature to create a better quality of life for ourselves? And that today really, really means restoring our natural habitat, because we can no more. There's the baseline is different now, and therefore we can't just rely on nature to just heal itself, because we've caused so much harm. So right now, I'm really focusing on developing processes and programs that would really create a culture of stewardship in the place, and how can people really work in different ways with their individual genius towards stewarding whichever aspect of the system, not just the natural system, but also the human system, because we're also living in a time when there's an active breakdown of humanity and community. And so we need to heal our human community itself. So yeah, so that's sort of what I'm really focusing my attention on. And then, of course, I'm really, really deeply drawn by the idea of bioregionalism because it really deals with how human beings see territory, and how human beings naturally form territories and how that can come to in a very positive way, affect the way we live.
I want to touch on two terms you used, and first acknowledge that what you're speaking to is so fundamentally regenerative, because regenerative is a place-sourced perspective. So you pay attention to literally where you are and what are the needs of that ecosystem in order to really heal and then thrive. So I know we've spoken about some of the things happening in Goa. Can you share a little bit about, sort of where the stress points are, and then how you are seeing opportunities to evolve a new story around what's possible in place?
Well, the simple answer for that is how, to the first question of like, what are the stress points? I think what is fundamentally changed is how we perceive what is developed, what is rich, how is wealth perceived and also displayed. And it really just means controlling nature today. When we look at infrastructure or a city which is developed, or a city which is rich, it really just translates in the mainstream imagination as to something that is literally covered in concrete, where there are gardens and controlled landscapes, but there's no wilderness. And so here in Goa, it's a small state in the southwestern coast of India, western coast of India, and it's a place of international repute because it was part of the hippie trail back in the 70s, which meant it attracted a lot of people who were actually seeking peace more than anything else. And that's what brought people here. And a lot of those people who came in the 70s as, in early 20s are now much older and they still live here. But what has changed post-COVID especially is that it's become a place for, second homes and for people from other parts of the country to come and settle here because other parts of the country have become so unlivable. Our cities have become so unlivable that people are escaping and coming here. Delhi, for example, has such terrible air quality that people can't breathe anymore, and they come here for respite. And it has both positives and negatives because it's suddenly become a very multicultural place from an Indian perspective as well. But it also came with these urban aspirations, and it's from day to day, we're seeing forests disappear, like bulldozers rolling in and just leveling out the land and building homes for people. And while homes are a necessity, yes, and people move in, they do need homes, and there's so much abundance here, so it can support more people. But the problem is that we're not being regenerative in how the design or the strategy of how the place is developed. And that is actually a mental shift that we need. And that's the biggest problem, that people can't tolerate nature. And at the end of the day, they don't want a snake to be able to come anywhere near there. And then you realize that not every snake is out to like kill you. But they're so important because they control rats and they control, other pests. So yeah. This has now created this ripple effect of disappearing biodiversity. So that's the biggest stress point. And the biggest solution, of course, is to create a mindset shift, because yes, any place that has so much biodiversity has the capacity to host many human beings. But how can each and every person, each and every human being living or interacting with that land actively steward it and regenerate it with every passing day? And the other interesting thing which I observe is this, which is, I would almost call it like an epidemic of searching for meaning that today we're seeing in the world. Like, as people make a lot of money, they are letting go of their corporate jobs and they come or to places like Goa and many places in the world like this, searching for meaning, searching for healing, and nothing like stewardship and working with nature to create that healing. So at this point, I'm really in a very research and observation phase where I'm trying to see, can we use all of people want to come and live here? Nature requires stewarding and intentional interactions with nature are very healing and very powerful. So can this all become a very positive nexus? And when in such an international place, because people come from here and go to all other parts of the country and all other parts of the world, and then it's a great hub to seed something, because it then goes to the whole world and as a mindset, as an attitude.
Mm. Powerful. Thank you for that response. That was really thorough and helpful, because as I'm listening to you, I can't help but a part of me always imagines the true potentiality of humanity to awake to this shift of perspective. It's literally just sitting right next door to the way we've been entrained to think and behave. Yet right next to that is this opening to a way of perceiving that is more life-affirming, more friendly, more encompassing of the well-being of more than just oneself, but the well-being of where you find yourself. And I think, I always have hope and faith, actually, in humanity to be able to make this step into a new perspective of witnessing the world around them as sacred, as precious, as something that we should be stewarding, something that we should be in relationship to as we are to a beloved, to a very dear friend, because it is so inherently necessary for our well-being, for us to thrive. The world around us must thrive. And we tend to get so encapsulated in our little boxes of reality, in the safety of our own experience, in the control that we want to exercise over the containers we occupy, the circumstances that we have. I mean, we have a real need. It's false because it's sort of playing against the reality of a perpetually evolving, changing, living world. But yet we have become almost addicted to control.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think this is a topic we've spoken about many times from different perspectives, as part of Regenerative Rising's processes and goals and mission as well. That it's really in the mind, the fact that there is this illusion that has been created that says that we don't have enough, and then we need to destroy everything and extract everything, because these are the resources we need to extract all of it, and then we still don't have enough. And it's a mindset that's driven by fear, by lack, and it's unsurprisingly, it's manifesting the same. So the more people become sort of retreat into their own sort of well-being by creating an imbalance of the other well-being, and other human beings, other systems, other creatures, other networks. But if we have to understand that our well-being depends on all other beings taken care of, then that really, I mean, I read something, say some random post which said, follow the relentless pursuit of freedom and not money. And then what that stood out to me is freedom means a lot of things. Freedom is the ability for a child to play in the neighborhood. Freedom is the ability to breathe clean air. Freedom is the ability to have a shower and not count the drops. And that freedom is what we're losing day to day when we're living in fear. There's more and more we're feeling like we start with snakes and wolves being our enemies, and then you go on to like each other, all people, everybody who's slightly different being an enemy, and then finally everybody who's not you is an enemy. So How do we shift that? Because if we're taking care of all, then it becomes a very beautiful, complex network of elements and entities taking care of each other, which is what nature is.
100%.
And that's the mindset shift that even as Regenerative Rising, we were really trying to ignite and sort of propagate and seed.
And that is the raison d'etre of the organization, is to help steward experiences and learning experiences that activate this remembrance, because I would contend we all carry this inside us on some level. It may be buried really deep, and it may never have ever had the light of day shine upon it. But I do trust that we are all part of this living planet. We're not some alien creature that showed up here. We are literally part of the very blood, bone, sinew of this living earth. Therefore, we carry a certain kind of wisdom within us, even if it's deeply beat down and not nourished, so that it doesn't function healthfully. But it's like in any healing modality, when you get into a healing process, part of what you have to do first is to really take stock of what got you to that disease point. And in interacting with what brought you to a disease point, you start to see pathways of how you can create differently so that you can, A, heal and restore yourself, and also not return to that disease state in the future, because you're shifting fundamental patterns in yourself. So much like it is for a human being when you get ill, I walked that path with breast cancer. When you step on the other side of that, there is a whole new opportunity to repattern. So just as what you're talking about, and I love so much that we're in a place-based conversation, because that is the true essence of regeneration. Regeneration is place-sourced. It starts as a developmental journey for an individual, a human being, in relationship to themselves, and then it carries into their relationship, their interconnection to everything else around them. And the complexity of that can be overwhelming, but at the same time, it's what we've been seeing our whole lives. We've just maybe not seen it genuinely.
Yeah. I mean, it's because we're an intricate part of nature as well. And in whichever way we look at it, if we look at it at a cellular level, each of our bodies is an ecosystem in itself. And then if we look at us as one element in the system that we're a part of, in the larger bioregion or the global systems, natural systems, we are playing a role in it. And that's I think, coming back to this idea of searching for healing, searching for meaning is also this. You ultimately come back to nature, because nothing as healing as like just being able to see birds, having the time of their lives, in the wild, not in a cage, and
Right.
touching the soil. There's such a difference in touching soil that's teeming with life and soil that's dead. There is a physical, tangible difference that each of us can feel. And that, I believe, is our connection with the earth that is coming through. Because when, it's almost like it's like some circuit is lighting up when that happens, and it goes back to our deep wiring. And we can, in this one of the things that in this regeneration journey is really important is also to like look at your intuitive self and see what does your intuition actually lead you to. Because we can sit and dissect and study the seabed and like document and research and cite, but it's not going to bring the depth of knowledge we already possess as that were birthed on this planet as part of the natural cycle. And I think that realization simplifies things. So it's also like, if you want a better life, if you want an easier life, if you want a life where you don't have to fear everything, we have to take a regenerative path. not just as an individual, but as a community.
You spark in me the phrase indigenous ways of knowing when you said what you just said in terms of we don't have to run 1,000 scientific researches and models and experiments in order to come to the understanding that putting pollutants into a native ecosystem will do damage. It doesn't belong there. It's not native to that place. So if you come back to the indigenous, we're all indigenous to Earth. So therefore, we all have the capacity to tap in, as you were saying, into that intuitive aspect of ourselves. I mean, that aspect is so beat up, right? I mean, it's associated with the feminine. The feminine is always a denigrated aspect of the human family, which is a travesty of epic proportions. If people ever ask me, Seleyn, what do you think is the most important ground revolutionizing change that could happen on the planet? And I'm like, that women and men have equal standing, that women are listened to as much as men are listened to, that women have a voice and a seat at the table in how we are stewarding our shared reality. And until that day comes, I fear we will miss the moment. It's like this moment that we're inside of collectively on this planet is also the result of thousands of years of patriarchy, of one perspective having dominance over another and denigrating that other perspective. I mean, yes, we're one species, but women and men, we are different. We know the brains are wired differently. We know there's a lot of fundamental, unique aspects, but that's the gift. If we could receive that gift, if we could receive the genius of the feminine and the genius of the masculine and the harmony in those within ourselves as humans, and then in relationship to each other in our different gender identifications, wow, what a tremendous untapped resource that we could bring to this moment in the human story.
Yeah, and for the people, a lot of times when I speak about, I'm sure you've experienced this as well, when we speak about bringing women, I mean, sort of into the conversation or uplifting the feminine, there's always some threatened male voices saying, opposing that. And I always think that the response,
or saying they're here, they're there,
yeah.
they're,
Yeah.
There's enough.
Right. But it also, I've personally observed this as well, that whenever there's a balance, and not like token women just sitting in a few chairs, but there's a balanced perspective and there's a balance of feminine and the masculine in the representation of any sort of whatever the discussion or the company or the community. There's also, I feel like it's easier on the men as well, because it's such a relief to be just be vulnerable. And I think that's what femininity, and there's masculine and feminine in every living being in the spiritual sense, and it's always a balance. And what the feminine brings to the table is vulnerability, to be comfortable with not having control over everything. And in the larger scheme of things, when this balance is achieved, I think it's a relief for everyone at that particular table to not have, because we can't control things. We can try and control things, which is what, a lot of systems in the world are doing, which is trying to control things by just destroying it. Like, oh, okay, this, whatever, the waves can be scary. Let's just build a wall so that the waves, but at some point, the wave is more powerful and it will come in. And when it comes in, it's going to be far more disastrous if you've built a badly thought out wall just for the reason of control and fear. But and we all often see this in organizations where there is a balance of masculine and feminine, that solutions even are really more intuitive, are more responding to the problem at hand, and also of like accepting certain things, whether it's comfort, whether it's abundance. Like, how do we even receive abundance without having to control it? How do we receive it
Mm.
today and leave it up to the universe whether we receive it tomorrow? It's only when we want to control the amount of abundance we get today, tomorrow, and for all days till the end of time, then we need to like start building forts and walls and safes and keep secrets from each other
Mm.
and guard it with guns and bombs. But the idea of abundance is that it just flows in and out as you need it. And a lot to do with that is the feminine as well, because that allows, and regardless of your gender, embracing the feminine is a very important part of living in a more, I would even say on a less stressful way, because you don't have to control anything. A little bit of the burden is off.
You're listening to Regenerative Rising, Elevating Stories, Activating Change podcast. I'm Seleyn DeYarus, and with me today is Nisha Mary Poulose. We are exploring sort of the deeper context of what fosters transformation. I would say some of what I think we're talking to is really what are transformative opportunities that our shared reality at this moment in time on planet Earth are opening up to us collectively. I think discomfort is a powerful activator, and there's a lot of discomfort in people wherever they are, be it political uncertainty, economic uncertainty, food scarcity, impact from climate, where things are no longer following patterns that we've relied on for literally thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years, for humanity to kind of come out of the trees and come into what we have manifested at this point, which is almost, we've snubbed the trees. We've snubbed all of the gifts that made the life that we've enjoyed, the opportunity to evolve, possible for us. Now we've become full of ourselves. There's a lot of hubris in how we operate and behave. And so, a big dose of humility is also being served up, because we're collectively in a moment that will either lead to our shared demise, or we're going to figure out a way to really meet this moment from this place you and I are speaking to, a place where we're in a relational context, which again is a more feminine way, versus a competitive frame, a more cooperative frame. How do we work with versus against? I mean, that's why I say it's literally like just stepping one step over from the current paradigm into this other way of seeing and thinking and perceiving, which is in an inclusive framework, a diversity framework, a welcoming framework, a saying yes versus no, a welcoming framework where we are concerned with the well-being of what is around us, be it soil, mineral, plant, animal, person, that these things take up some space in our consciousness and in our level of care.
Yeah. And I recently, a few days ago, I came across a very old encyclopedia, as in it was first copyrighted in 1985. And I was just like flipping through it, and it was about animals, the animal world. And I was thinking most of this information is still where we are at today. I don't think whatever was written, it was like a child's encyclopedia. So like little things written in such simple ways. And I was thinking, oh my God, we already knew this, and I'm sure even before that, for a long time, even by Western science standards, this information has been known, but then we're not willing to act on it or accept it. And this is sort of things like, like the World Book, or I forget the other one, the Encyclopedia Britannica, which we all used to refer as this had all this information already. And it was really interesting that a lot of children read this growing up, believed this growing up, and then somewhere along their path to adulthood, just started disregarding this information, which they already knew, which is basically the purpose and the interconnectivity of all living things, and how nothing is just a useless being meant to be killed and destroyed. And there was always this balanced understanding. And then, of course, if you look back to the indigenous perspective, which is thousands of years old and very place-based, specific knowledge that is very intuitively understanding the earth, its wisdom and its medicine and food, and how all of this is so place-based. I think that's the big difference, that the indigenous ideas are. It's very place-based, and people are openly accepting of the fact that their knowledge is limited to their place. And when they go to another place, it's another knowledge, and you don't take the supply there. And that's how nature works as well. So I was really just wondering, like how are we at this place where we know things and we still don't want to pay attention to it? And then we want to do things which we know are harmful to us and the planet. Like there's so much. It's at this point, it's pretty clear that if something is harmful for us, and most of the things we're doing today, including the food we eat, the medicines we consume, the air we breathe, the way we travel, our sedentary lifestyles, all of it is harmful for us. So it's equally harmful for the entire planet.
Yeah.
And very few people will argue with this, that a sedentary lifestyle is.
But they'll still have that lifestyle, and they'll still eat that donut. And I think this is I think the crux of the matter, because really what we're talking about is how do you generate the will to actually change?
Yeah.
Because coming back to all of this, it has to start with me. It has to start with you. If I can't take it on myself, if I can't change my pattern and start getting up in the morning and doing my stretching and exercising, because if I know that my stretching and exercising is good for me and I just think about it, but I don't do it, it's nothing.
Yeah.
So, if I am in any way, I think we can bring it back to the individual. And it's hard for an individual to change patterns and behaviors. Therefore, when you talk about in mass and collective, this is a mammoth thing we're talking about. It's simple to say, it is utterly not simple to get moving in the world. So I think there's a lot of compassion in this process that we have to absolutely bring forward in saying, we acknowledge that this is difficult. What we're talking about is difficult. Yes, it's a step, but that step is a giant leap. And that giant leap is requiring a level of self-care, self-discipline, and a level of, I'm going to use the word investment, like to invest in my best self, to be healthy in my heart and my mind and my body and my spirit. That is a total holistic investment. And it requires my attention and my effort and my devotion every single day. It's not like I can do it one day and go, got that off the list. Oh, nope, got to do it again today. And I got to do it again today. And I got to do it again today. And it's what happens, though, is when you start doing something good for yourself, it has this reward built into it because, I feel better. I have more energy. My body feels better. The tension's leaving. I'm going to do that again. And then it has a way of rewarding us when we start to do things that do take care of us. You reduce sugar, you feel better. You reduce overconsumption of whatever it is, you will feel better. It's beautiful that we're designed for a harmonious homeostasis state, that life wants to be whole, life wants to be well, life is powerful. We have the greatest ally in the universe, life, as our co-creator, as our ally in moving to new patterns of behavior, new states of being. But it does require will. It requires the impetus to take that first step and follow it with another step.
Yeah, and I would also just add faith, and weirdly, faith in the as opposed to faith in the unknown. And there's this interesting thing happening in the world today that people would rather put faith in things that are kind of unknown and relatively new, as opposed to faith in things that have worked for thousands of years, even if they know it. And I mean,
Can you give an example of that?
I mean, the way in which like food, for example, right? I mean, wherever in the world you are from, wherever in the world you're living, we do have an idea of like what makes us feel better when we eat it. We have some connection to our ancestry, whether it's just stories from your grandmother or stories from books you've read or whatever from your region. Or fine, if it's not your ancestry, the ancestry of the people who are living in that place. So you do know what is the food that is good for you and what is the food. And even if you may not know the specifics, it just takes a little bit of exploration to find out local food and how it nourishes you, as opposed to packaged, overprocessed food. But it still feels like it's a hard choice to make, not just in terms of what you're used to and what you're being lazy about, but it feels like this information coming in from partially known, relatively new sources seem to be, okay, oh, this new superfood is the best thing, and then everybody gets on that train and just forgets about everything else. But we all know that a balanced diet is what we need. I mean, this is something everybody knows by default, that you need a balanced diet. And a balanced diet definitely means not eating overprocessed chemical-filled food. But we still have a hard time taking that advice that we are giving ourselves. I mean, that intuitive and ancestral understanding of what is good for us, it seems to be that it's harder to put faith in that knowledge than in research or science or some new advertisement that is projecting something which we kind of have an intuitive realization is possibly unhealthy, but it seems to be harder to choose this rather than the newer thing. And I've been sort of, I don't have an answer to it, but I keep wondering what is it that as human beings, this is not specific to any region or community. It just is how at least these generations that are currently alive today, this is how we seem to be understanding information and leading our own lives.
Well, I would posit that we mentioned it a little while ago. Patriarchy is a top-down structure. So you don't trust yourself as much as you're taught to trust something outside of yourself as knowing what's good for you. In a hierarchical set of, where the power is, who has the knowledge, who doesn't have the knowledge. We're all pretty much programmed from a very early part of our lives to not listen to ourselves as much as we are taught to listen to someone with greater authority. So being a self-authorizing, to have authority and agency of self is often seen in a denigrated way. It's not encouraged. It's often, especially if you're a woman, oh, good luck. I've read an article very recently that was like, a woman who asserts herself is immediately put in a category of like, stay away from her. A woman who stays in a more traditionally behaving role of being more demure, she'll be welcomed at the table. But if she starts to assert, good luck. You're going to go get moved quickly into that. That's unacceptable. So it's a very long-standing pattern that we all are indoctrinated into. And it has so much at its root that we don't trust our own self-knowing, that we give the power to the doctor, we give the power to the husband, we give the power to the brother, we give the power to the other, and not to ourselves. And this is true for so long that we can't even see it.
That's very true. And that's why we are unable to rely on local sources of information, because somebody who has never seen this place or never met you, or never even understood this context, has decided what is right and what is wrong. And everyone just jumps on board because it's easier to just, at least the way. And I think that's also a degeneration of our own mindset and our own capacity, because we've become a population that just wants to follow some orders. Just tell us what to do. Do I just like use renewable energy, or do I just tell me what to do, and I don't want to think beyond it. Don't tell me something else tomorrow. So it's very it's very interesting how we've become there. And I think part of the regeneration process is also that, to break out of that, to understand the local context, to step into, and I'd like to call this sort of re-indigenize ourselves in a sense, like
Yeah.
either to where we're living or to our own ancestral indigeneity. Either way, how do we
Or the whole planet, like literally recognize we're earthlings.
Yeah.
And that's not some sort of sci-fi terminology. It's like something very fundamental.
Yeah. And what is that? I mean, and I think that's interesting, because I think that's the next sort of chapter of regenerative rising as well. That this is how, because the question then is, how do we re-indigenize, or how do we really connect with the earth? And there's a lot of we've all been talking a lot about this. There is certainly a community in the world that has been actively talking about this for a while now, and in some ways could be perceived as a bubble, but the bubble is expanding. But when people are coming into this space, the question then is like, okay, tell me how, because we're looking at, basically we've been now trained to just follow orders, and not question things. But now we are coming into a space where we have healthy questioning. Like, if something is good, why is it good? Or explore, is it really good? Like, is it good for everything? Is it linking with everything in a positive way? And like, that to me is like, how do we create, and that's essentially how the brain works. The brain is such a powerful an organism itself, where it can really look at, it has its own way, and it's the organ that even the biggest scientists have not fully figured out yet. But it can connect the dots, and that's our natural state of being. So then why are we limiting our capacity to be such linear thinkers and just be like, okay, I will just take this whatever mineral and use it for this, and not care about any of the other effects of extracting that. But everybody has the capacity to look at that and say, okay, it's affecting this in this way, it's affecting wildlife in this way, it's affecting local population in this way. And it is possible for everything to be positive. It's just that that's not how things are designed in mainstream today. So when there's a problem statement that's created to design something, a system, the problem statement, and it's, the things that you need to solve is not a holistic statement to start.
No, it's mostly extractive.
Yes,
I think I was thinking to something you asked in them earlier, like, why is this way? And I'm like, well, this is about a balance of power, a shifting of power. Power has been held by the few over the many for generation after generation after generation after generation after generation. It's a very long, long line of perpetuation. So, we're talking about literally liberation, freedom from a way of perceiving first oneself as having agency, as having authority to make choices that are considered differently than, like you're saying, we're not automatons. We are powerful creatures, each and every one of us. We simply have lost a certain kind of understanding around what that actually opens up, because it doesn't mean you become another marauding invader and you just become a selfish ass and do whatever you want. That's not what this conversation is in service to, and nor is that what the world is needing at this moment. What it needs are people who take on their own development to become a more caring, conscious presence in the best of who they are capable of being and bringing their gifts, because we all have gifts. And it's like, that's by, the gift of being alive is profound. So, when I think about young people and old people and all people, and I think about, I'm always curious, what makes you tick? Like, what really is your inspiration in your heart of hearts? If you could say without feeling embarrassed or uncomfortable, what would just make you so joyful to be able to express, to manifest in your life? What would that be? And I think we start to find clues to who we each are by what our answer is to that question. And we have to pose that question to ourselves without fear of recrimination, without fear of being shamed, because we actually want to step out of the treadmill to get out of the cycle that has been perpetuated by our ancestors and our grandparents and our parents and ourselves. And we want to actually do something innovatively unique and show up and pay attention to what is needed in service to something more than just one's own existence. It has to have an inclusivity at its heart in order to be regenerative, because a tree recognizes its connection to the entirety. I mean, we have enough knowledge now about the relationship of trees to each other, their ability to communicate, how they feed their offspring. Yes, there's some competition under the soil. This is not, like a Pollyanna's dream that we think everything is always in perfect harmony. No, but it also isn't. A tree isn't pulling out a AK-47 and gunning down the trees around it to have all the light. It's just, we are the only species that destroys the way that we do.
Yeah. And then it's also an important lesson in sort of looking at things with balance, because, it's so extreme right now. And there's one part of the world that is just like thinking that the only way to safeguard this way of life, and I put that within quotes, this way of life, is to continue extracting and extracting and extracting.
Right.
And in that extraction, I mean, unfortunately, this extraction is, I would think, if you want to extract certain minerals, with all of the science and technology in the world today, I'm sure there's a way of extracting without killing everything and enslaving people and like polluting everything. If we were to put our heads together, even if we want to extract minerals, or there could be a way where it's not causing complete destruction and disruption, but it's
Absolutely.
just care that. Because you want it, the easiest way is to just like level everything out, like
blow off the top of a mountain and get to the coal. I mean, it's like, what? No, you're right. I mean, it would just require a whole new set of approaches. Again, coming back to regeneration, it is about creating a much more fundamentally collaborative, holistic approach. So when you talk about minerals, I mean, I immediately think of countries in Africa and, children digging stuff out of the mud. And if that whole setup was about creating shared well-being, that everyone in that ecosystem is rewarded in a much more fair way, then the people at the very top don't get to be paid gazillions of dollars, and the people at the bottom don't get to be paid a penance. Has to be an equalization of something that is so much more respectful, so that the gap between is much less, because we don't, no individual, sorry, all you people out there with your, piles of money, it's not needed. And in fact, we've talked about this earlier, meaning does not come from that kind of accumulation. You can accumulate every known thing and still feel deeply empty, because it's an interior dance. It has to do with being in a developmental relationship to your own spirit, soul, mind, body, beingness. And that is ultimately all of our individual sources of our greatest source of joy. It can just be beholding a sunrise and being moved to tears at the beauty.
Yeah.
That is meaning.
Yeah, that is a simple, basic, stress-free form of meaning, where you find meaning wherever you are.
You
And
must.
to your point of like, if we were to make sure every being, not just humans, but everything is given some form of a share, which is just, then we would also be careful about extracting. It's only because we only need to pay, it's only because only the top 0.05% needs to be paid everything, that the entire, the thousands, if not millions of people and zillions of other beings that are whose lives don't matter in this process.
Right.
It's only because of that this accumulation is even possible, and
That's right.
it's and I often think like, okay, you want to extract something. There is also a way of like, can we do it in a way that you take some and then you give the same back in the same holistic way. Like if you look at disused minds, nobody cares about the same creative forces that came up with a way of extracting oil from deep within the earth can certainly come up with a way of like seeding new life and protecting that land for the next. And this is again coming back to sort of indigenous principles of like looking at indigenous agroforestry systems, where they went into a forest and then they did cut down trees and clear a patch and grow food. It's not that they did not do that, but they did that. But
Absolutely.
they when they got something out of it, when they felt that the land was suffering, they stepped away from that, went to another place and allowed and facilitated the healing of this land and that is really the difference. And this is often my answer to people who ask me, okay, so how do we live? You're saying like, don't drive cars. Then how are we supposed to just like go on a bullock cart and it's flabbergasting when this is such a, I face this question very often because the
Of
minute
course.
it's trying to tell people, hey, let's live with this duty of care. I love that phrase, our duty of care. It's often met with like, oh, so you want us to just live in caves? And the answer is no. We can progress. We can have the comfort. We can have the safety.
We could
That
probably have more care and comfort if we were more collective in how we co-imagined it. I think so much of what is really at the another layer of this is the loss of imagination.
yeah.
Our capacity to imagine a future positive is almost gone. You ask people about the future and it's dystopic. People have visions of horrific things, of wars, of pestilence, of all sorts of terrible things. But to ask them to think of something beautiful and affirming and cooperative and inspiring about a future, that I find is a much harder it's an unused muscle in the human collective. And that is something that I know you and I both know as part of our life work is to help inspire this kind of attitude of gratitude, an attitude of potential, an attitude of co-creation, an attitude of optimism, because we have phenomenal capabilities. And when we trust in the genius of our neighbor, when we're willing to witness that you have something that is beneficial, I have something that's beneficial, and when we come together, that expands exponentially. And that is really what I see as the opportunity facing humanity at this moment in our shared story is, will we awaken to value the dignity and genius of all life around us, and that it has something to contribute. And when we aren't so self-centered, and so lost in the old patterns of hierarchy. And instead, we're looking at things from a collective perspective of interrelational perspective, that suddenly the potential, the possibilities that awake are phenomenal and they're exciting. And it sees us having a chance to seed literally the universe in a very different way as a species that has come to recognize the preciousness of home, to care for home as the most precious part of being, so that we have something to take out into a larger context. And we would be a value add versus right now, if we go out into the world and into the stars as we are right now, oh gosh, what a nightmare. What a nightmare that will be.
Yeah.
We have a lot to do here before we really would be well served in going anywhere else. We have to figure out how we're going to co-create a shared reality that is of benefit. As you said, our duty of care to each other and to all life. And that's a beautiful invitation from my perspective.
Yeah, me too. I think even the idea of imagining the future we want as beings of this planet, not beings who are planning our exit from this planet, as beings who evolved. I mean, what a miracle! What an unimaginable thing, actually, that we evolved to be what we are. And instead of like holding that, upholding that, and revering that and considering it sacred, we're just like literally killing the same system that allowed for our evolution. And the solution is not bunkers and rockets and ships to take us to
It's
some
right
other-
under our feet. I mean, that's the beauty. It's right under our feet.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I am so grateful that we sat together today and had this conversation, Nisha.
Yeah, me too. It's always so meaningful when I have these conversations with you. It's so fulfilling as well, and I'm excited that it got recorded for a change this time. So thank you for making this happen as well.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you for joining the advisory board of Regenerative Rising. And I have no doubt our paths are entwined, and we will find many ways to keep lifting each other up and supporting each other in what we're bringing to this beautiful world, because you're my sister and I love you dearly, and I'm so thankful.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I can't. I think the role or the title aside, I'm in spirit really always a part of Regenerative Rising, and I really am excited for this new chapter of the new things that are coming, and I really have a lot of faith that whatever is evolving as an organization and in our individual roles and the times that our paths cross are all for the greater good of the mission that we sort of our missions are so aligned, whether it's as an organization or as individuals.
Yes.
And through Regenerative Rising, I think one thing that I experienced the most was the power of sisterhood and the power of having women allies. And I'm grateful and I'm excited as well for the things that we will do together one way or another.
Absolutely. Well, you've been listening to Regenerative Rising's podcast, Elevating Stories, Activating Change. Nisha Mary Poulose has been our guest. I have been our steward of the conversation, Seleyn and DeYarus. And thank you, thank you. I look forward to, I think we should do this again. And blessings to you as you step forward onto this new path. And look out, Goa. They have a goddess coming in with incredible insight. I know that you will do phenomenal good and help people develop this way of seeing and having the joyful experience of their duty of care.
Thank you, Seleyn, and thank you for facilitating this conversation. I'm really looking forward to, I would love to have more conversations. I look forward to that. And to sort of, I guess I'm really looking forward to the collective community that we're a part of to reimagine or reimage the world that we do want, and not manifest the world we fear.
Ah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for making this happen.
My pleasure.